The sky burned orange and red above the city of Prime. Commander Elia stood at the window of her underground bunker and watched another building collapse in the distance. The sound came a moment later, a deep rumble that shook dust from the ceiling and made the lights flicker. She was tired, so very tired. The people had been fighting for 3 generations now. Her grandmother had seen the first ships appear in the sky. Her mother had watched the outer colonies fall one by one. And now Elia stood as the last military commander of her dying world, watching the final city burn. They were not warriors. They had never been warriors. Their ancestors were gentle creatures who ate plants and built beautiful things. They made music and art and poetry. They studied the stars and dreamed of peace. When they came, they did not know how to fight back. They learned, but learning was not enough. Elia turned away from the window. Her silver-blue skin was covered in dust, and her large, dark eyes were red from lack of sleep. She had not rested in 4 days. There was no time for rest. There was only the war. "Commander," said a voice behind her. She turned to see her second-in-command. He was young, barely past his growth cycle, with the eager face of someone who still believed in hope. Elia him that belief. She had lost hers long ago. "Report," she said. "The Eastern District has fallen. We have pulled our remaining forces back to the inner ring. They are bringing up heavy artillery." Paused. His voice dropped. "Commander, we have perhaps 2 days, maybe less." 2 days. After 3 generations of war, her people had 2 days left. Elia walked to the tactical display. It showed the city from above, a shrinking circle of blue surrounded by spreading red. The blue was her people. The red was death. "How many civilians remain?" she asked. 4 million in the shelters, mostly children and elderly. The healthy adults are fighting or dead. 4 million. Elia closed her eyes. 4 million lives that she could not save. "The transmission," she said. "Has there been any response?" Looked at the floor. "No, Commander, nothing." The transmission. 3 weeks ago, when Elia had seen the true size of the invasion force, she had done something desperate. She had sent a message out into the void on every frequency she knew, a call for help, a plea to anyone who might hear. She had heard stories of a species called humans, strange creatures from a small blue world far across the galaxy. The stories said they were fierce warriors, that they had never lost a war, that they would fight for those who could not fight for themselves. Elia had not believed the stories. They sounded like myths, like tales parents told children to help them sleep. But she had sent the message anyway, because she had nothing left to lose. And no one had answered. "They are not coming," said softly. "The humans, even if the stories are true, they are too far away. We are alone." Elia opened her eyes. "Then we die alone, but we die fighting." She walked past and into the corridor. The bunker was deep underground, carved from solid rock. It had been built as a shelter, not a fortress, but now it served as both. Soldiers lined the walls, checking weapons, treating wounds, saying quiet goodbyes to each other. They all knew. Elia made her way down to the lowest level, where the civilian shelters were. The corridors here were packed with her people. Families huddled together on blankets. Children played quiet games in corners. Mothers held bobbies and sang soft songs to keep them calm. An old male approached her. His name was, and he had been a teacher before the war. Now he helped organize the shelters. "Commander," he said, "the children have been asking about the humans. They heard about the transmission. They think help is coming." Elia felt something crack inside her chest. "What have you told them?" "I told them to hope. Was I wrong?" She looked at the children, small faces with large eyes looking up at her with trust she did not deserve. They believed in her. They believed she could save them. She could not. "Hope is never wrong," Elia said. "Let them hope." She turned and walked away before could see her tears. They attacked again that night. Their artillery hammered the city for 6 hours straight. Elia stood in the command center, giving orders, moving troops, trying to hold a line that could not be held. They were not living creatures in the way understood life. They were a hive mind, millions of bodies controlled by a single vast intelligence. They felt no fear, no pain, no mercy. They existed only to consume, to spread, to grow. In 3,000 years, they had devoured 11 species. There would be the 12th. By morning, the eastern artillery had breached the inner wall. Soldiers poured through the gap. Defenders fought them hand to hand in the rubble, dying by the dozens, buying minutes with their lives. Elia watched the tactical display as the blue circle grew smaller and smaller. She thought about her grandmother, who had looked up at the sky and seen the end of everything. She thought about her mother, who had fought and died believing that somehow, someday, they would survive. She thought about the children in the shelters below, still hopping for rescue. The door opened behind her, entered his face pale. "Commander, they have sent a message." "Show me." The display flickered, appeared on screen. It was tall and thin, with black eyes and skin that seemed to shift and move. When it spoke, its voice was many voices layered together, echoing and wrong. It said, "Your resistance ends. Surrender your population for processing. Those who comply will be absorbed quickly. Those who resist will suffer." The screen went dark. Looked at her. "Commander, what do we do?" Elia stared at the blank display. Processing. Absorption. They did not take prisoners. They took bodies, minds, souls. They took everything that made a person who they were and turned it into more of themselves. She would not allow that. She would not let her people become monsters. "We fight," she said. "Until the last of us falls, we fight." She walked to the communications console and opened a channel to all forces. "This is Commander Elia. They have demanded our surrender. I have refused. I will not ask any of you to die for a lost cause, but I will ask you to die as free and unbroken. If anyone wishes to lay down their weapons, I will not blame them, but I will stand. I will fight, and I will die on my feet." She closed the channel. For a long moment there was silence. Then, one by one, voices came back over the radio. Soldiers reporting in, confirming their positions, saying they would stand with her. All of them, every single one. Wiped his eyes. "Commander, it has been an honor." Elia nodded. "The honor is mine." Outside, the artillery began again. The bunker shook. Somewhere above, another building fell. And in the silence between explosions, Elia thought she heard something. A sound she did not recognize. A distant thunder that did not match the rhythm of the guns. But that was impossible. That was hope. And hope, she had learned, was the lie of all. 12 light-years away from the burning world of Prime, Staff Sergeant Park sat alone in his quarters aboard the carrier ship Indomitable. He was reading a message on his personal screen. The message was 3 weeks old, but he had watched it 47 times. It showed a female with silver-blue skin and tired eyes. She was standing in what looked like a military command center. Behind her, through a window, the sky was on fire. "This is Commander Elia of the Defense Force," she said. Her voice was calm but could hear the fear underneath. "We are under attack by the Imperium. Our military is nearly destroyed. Our people are dying. We have 4 million civilians in the capital, mostly children and elderly. We cannot evacuate. We cannot surrender. We can only hope." She paused. Her large dark eyes looked directly at the camera. "We have heard stories of Earth, stories of warriors who fight for those who cannot fight themselves. We do not know if these stories are true, but if they are, if anyone is listening, please help us. Please." The message ended. Closed his eyes. He was 34 years old. He had been a Marine for 16 of those years. He had fought in the Mars Uprising, in the Europa Campaign, in the Belt Wars. He had killed men and watched friends die. He had done terrible things for reasons he believed were right. But he had never ignored a call for help. The problem was simple. They were too far away. Earth's military command had looked at the numbers and decided that a rescue mission was not practical. The resources required were too great. The chances of success were too small. They were not allies, not trading partners, not strategically important. Command had said no. Stood up and walked to his locker. He pulled out his combat armor and began putting it on, piece by piece. The armor was black from a dozen battles, fitted to his body like a second skin. When he wore it, he felt like himself. His door chimed. "Enter," he said. The door opened. 7 Marines walked in. They were his squad, his family, his reason for living. They had followed him through hell more times than he could count. Corporal was first. She was the squad's medic, 26 years old, with steady hands and calm eyes. She could save a life in the middle of a firefight and never lose her focus. Behind her came Sergeant Han, the heavy weapons specialist. She was 31, tall for a woman, with muscles built from carrying guns that weighed more than most people. She never smiled, but she never had to. Her actions spoke louder than any expression. Private First Class was next. He was the youngest at 21, fresh from training, with the eager energy of someone who had not yet learned to be afraid. Saw himself in from a long time ago. Then came the others. Private, quiet and dependable. Lance Corporal Shin, fast and fierce. Corporal O, the squad sniper. Private Moon, their explosives expert. 8 Marines. 8 people who had chosen to follow him. "You heard the message," said. "It was not a question." Nodded. "We all did. The whole ship has seen it." Command said no. "Command is wrong," said. Her voice was flat, certain. Looked at each of them in turn. "If we do this, we do it alone. No backup, no support, no extraction. The Navy might get us to the planet, but after that we are on our own." "How bad is it?" asked. "They have a full invasion force. Thousands of soldiers, heavy armor, orbital support. The defenders are almost gone. 4 million civilians are trapped in the capital." "And we are 8, said quietly. "We are 8. Silence filled the room. Waited. He would not order them to do this. He could not. This was beyond orders, beyond duty, beyond anything the military had trained them for. This was a choice. Spoke first. "I did not become a Marine to watch children die." "Neither did I," said. One by one they nodded, all of them, no hesitation, no doubt. Felt something warm in his chest, pride maybe, or love. He was not sure, there was a difference. "Get your gear," he said. "We leave in 1 hour." The squad dispersed, finished putting on his armor and went to find the ship's captain. Captain No was a small woman with hair and sharp eyes. She had commanded the Indomitable for 12 years. She had seen more combat than most admirals. When entered her ready room, she was already waiting for him. "I know why you are here," she said. "Then you know what I am going to ask. You want me to take my ship into controlled space, break through their blockade, and drop your squad onto a planet that Command has written off as a lost cause." "Yes." Captain No leaned back in her chair. "Do you know what will happen to me if I do this? Court-martial, discharge, prison maybe." "Yes." "Do you know what will happen to you?" "I will probably die. My squad will probably die, but they might live." The captain was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her desk and pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. She poured a drink for each of them. "I have a granddaughter," she said. "She is 4 years old. When I talk to her on video calls, she asks me what I do. I tell her that I protect people, that I keep them safe." She looked at. "What kind of grandmother would I be if I let 4 million children die because it was not practical to save them?" She raised her glass. "We leave in 1 hour, Sergeant. Get your squad ready." Took the glass and drank. The alcohol burned his throat. "Thank you, Captain." "Do not thank me yet. Thank me when we are all still alive." 1 hour later, the Indomitable broke formation and set course for Prime. The Navy command sent angry messages demanding they return. Captain No turned off the communications system. In the cargo bay, gathered his squad around a holographic display of the planet. The capital city was marked in blue, surrounded by a sea of red. "This is the situation," he said. "They have the city surrounded. They are pushing in from all sides. They have maybe 2 days before they are overrun." "What is our objective?" asked. "We drop into the city center. We establish a defensive position. We hold until they can evacuate their civilians." "Hold for how long?" asked. "As long as it takes." Checked her weapon, a massive gun that required 2 people to carry. She carried it alone. Rules of engagement. Kill anything that is not or human. Protect the civilians at all costs. Do not die unless you have to. The squad laughed. It was a dark laugh, the laugh of people who knew they might not survive the day, but it was real. "One more thing," said. "They do not know we are coming. They sent a message into the void and received no answer. They think they are alone. They think no one cares." He looked at each of his Marines. "We are going to show them they are wrong. We are going to show them what humans do when someone calls for help." He put his hand out. One by one, the others placed their hands on top of his. "For those," said. "For those," they answered. The Indomitable flew on through the darkness of space, carrying 8 Marines toward a battle they could not win. But winning was not the point. The point was showing up. They had conquered 11 species across 3,000 years. They had turned entire civilizations into dust. They had faced every weapon, every tactic, every desperate act of resistance that living beings could create. Nothing had stopped them. Nothing had even slowed them down. They had studied humans from a distance. Small creatures, soft bodies, short lives, no claws or venom or natural armor. The intelligence network had classified Earth as non-threatening, observation only. This was the greatest mistake in history. The first warning came from the orbital defense platforms. Sensors detected incoming ships, human vessels moving at high speed toward the planet. The commander was not concerned. Human ships were primitive, their weapons weak, their tactics predictable. Then the human carrier began its attack run. The Indomitable dove through the blockade like a knife through water. Captain No had spent 30 years learning how to fly ships in ways that should not be possible. She used all of that knowledge now. Her vessel twisted and spun between enemy fire, dodging plasma beams by meters, returning fire with perfect accuracy. 3 cruisers exploded in the first minute. "Launch the drop pods," she ordered. In the cargo bay, Staff Sergeant Park felt the floor shake as the pod doors opened. He was strapped into a metal coffin with 7 other Marines, falling toward a burning world at terminal velocity. 30 seconds to impact," said the computer voice. "Remember the plan," said over the squad radio. "We hit ground, we secure a perimeter, we find the command. No one dies today." "You always say that," said. "And I am usually right." 20 seconds. Through the small window of the drop pod could see the planet rushing up to meet them. The capital city was visible now, a sprawling mass of buildings surrounded by smoke and fire. He could see forces everywhere, thousands of soldiers, dozens of tanks, artillery pieces that looked like metal insects. 10 seconds. Loaded her heavy weapon, gripped his rifle so hard his knuckles turned white, closed his eyes and moved his lips in silent prayer. 5 seconds. The drop pod hit the ground. The impact was violent, a crushing force that slammed against his restraints. Then the pod walls blew outward, and he was moving, running, rifle up and firing before his feet touched solid ground. They had not expected them. The first wave of enemy soldiers died before they understood what was happening. Moved through them like a ghost, his rifle spitting fire, each shot finding its target. Behind him, his squad spread out in perfect formation, covering angles, watching each other's backs. Smoke grenades went off. Thick black clouds covered their advance. And then they saw them. Commander Elia was in the command bunker when the first reports came in. She did not believe them. "Repeat that," she said to the soldier at the communications console. "Commander, there are unknown forces engaging thee in the city center. Small unit, maybe 10 individuals. They are pushing through the enemy lines." "What species?" "Unknown. They are too small to be. They are wearing black armor and moving very fast." Elia ran to the observation post. She had to see this for herself. The sight that met her eyes made no sense. Through the smoke of battle, she saw figures emerging. They were small, barely half the height of a, covered in dark armor that seemed to absorb light. They moved in ways that should not be possible, fast and precise, like a single creature with 8 bodies. They were shooting at them. Plasma fire filled the air, bright bolts of energy that could melt stone. The small creatures did not stop. They did not slow down. When one of them was hit, they stumbled, but they kept moving. They kept fighting. And they kept winning. Elia watched as one of the creatures set up some kind of weapon. It was huge, almost as big as the creature carrying it. When it fired, an entire armor column disappeared in a ball of fire and thunder. "What are they?" asked beside her. Before Elia could answer, her communications console crackled with an unfamiliar voice. "Command, this is Earth Marine Actual. We are on the ground. Stay in your shelters. We will handle this." Humans, the stories were true. Elia grabbed the communicator with shaking hands. "Earth Marine, this is Commander Elia. How many of you are there?" "8. 8. There are thousands of soldiers in the city." "Yes, please stay in your shelters. This will not take long." The line went silent. Elia turned back to the observation window. She watched the 8 humans advance through the lines like fire through dry grass. They did not fight like any warriors she had ever seen. They fought like something else entirely, something that did not know how to stop. In the streets below, Staff Sergeant Park pushed forward. His armor had taken 3 hits already. One had cracked his shoulder plate. Another had burned through his left arm guard. He could feel blood running down his arm, warm and wet. He kept moving. To his left, Corporal was treating a wound on her own leg while still firing her sidearm. To his right, Private First Class had picked up a weapon from a fallen enemy and was using it alongside his rifle, one in each hand. Sergeant Han had found a position on a collapsed building. Her heavy weapon roared like thunder, cutting down soldiers by the dozens. When they tried to flank her, Lance Corporal Shin appeared from the smoke and killed them before they could fire a shot. They were not prepared for this. They had studied human military tactics. They knew about human weapons and vehicles and strategies, but they had not understood what humans truly were. They had not understood that humans were not just soldiers. Humans were something older, something deeper, something that had crawled up from the mud of a small blue world and learned to fight against everything that tried to kill them, against predators and diseases and each other, against cold and hunger and despair. Humans had learned that the only way to survive was to never give up. The commander watched the battle reports with growing confusion. 8 humans were holding off his advance force. 8. His soldiers outnumbered them 100 to 1, and they were losing. "Increase artillery fire on their position," he ordered. The artillery fired. The humans disappeared in smoke and flame. And when the smoke cleared, they were still standing, still fighting, still advancing. The commander felt something he had never felt before in his 300 years of existence. Fear. As night fell over the burning city, the humans reached the defensive line, found an officer and spoke to him through his translator. "Where is Commander Elia?" The officer pointed to the bunker entrance, his large eyes wide with shock. Nodded and turned to his squad. "Treat the wounded, set up defensive positions, Everyone else resupply and rest while you can. This is not over. Sergeant said, and we actually did it. We broke through. Looked at the young Marine. Behind him, the city burned. Ahead of them, thousands more soldiers waited. They had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. We did the easy part, said. Now we have to hold. He walked toward the bunker entrance, leaving bloody footprints on the stone. Above them, more ships were entering orbit. The real fight was about to begin. The battle for Prime lasted 19 hours. 19 hours of constant fighting, constant death, constant fire and blood and screaming. 19 hours that changed the galaxy forever. By hour 6, they had committed their reserve forces. Every soldier they had on the planet was now focused on one objective: kill the humans. The 8 small creatures had become the most important target in the entire war. By hour 12, they had called for reinforcements from orbit. More soldiers, more tanks, more artillery. They threw everything they had at the human position. It was not enough. Corporal had run out of medical supplies by hour 8. She had brought enough to treat 20 serious injuries. By hour 8, she had treated 53. So she improvised. They had their own medical technology designed for their own bodies, learned to use it in minutes. She adapted, modified, invented new techniques on the spot. When she needed tools she did not have, she made them from debris. When she needed medicines she could not find, she mixed chemicals from equipment. At hour 11, a child wandered into the combat zone. He was small, maybe 5 years old in human terms, with silver skin and terrified eyes. He had gotten separated from his family during an evacuation. Saw him at the same moment a squad did. She did not think, she ran. The distance was 50 meters of open ground, with no cover under heavy fire. No sane person would try to cross it, crossed it in 8 seconds. She grabbed the child and turned to run back. 2 plasma bolts hit her back armor. The impact threw her forward, but she twisted in the air, protecting the child with her body. She hit the ground hard. Her armor was smoking. Her back felt like it was on fire. She got up and kept running. When she reached cover, she handed the child to a soldier and went back to treating the wounded. She did not stop. She did not complain. She just kept working. Private First Class discovered something about himself at hour 9. He had always thought he was brave. In training, he had scored high marks in combat simulations. He had told himself that he was ready for war. He was wrong. When a breaching team cornered him in the ruins of a temple, he learned what fear really felt like. It was cold and sharp, like a knife in his stomach. It made his hands shake and his vision blur. They were between him and his squad. His rifle was empty. His backup weapon was broken. He had only a combat knife and a piece of broken metal from a destroyed wall. 4 soldiers moved toward him. They were tall and with black eyes that showed no emotion. They did not see him as a threat. They saw him as prey. Took a breath. Fear, he realized, was just a feeling. It could be felt, it could be acknowledged, and it could be set aside. He charged. The first died before it understood what was happening, drove his knife through its throat, and used its falling body as a shield against the second one. He killed the second one with the broken metal, a wild swing that caught it across the face. The third and fourth fired at him. One bolt grazed his shoulder, another missed by centimeters. Did not stop. He killed the third one with his bare hands, a desperate attack that ended with him slamming its head against the stone floor. The fourth one tried to run. He caught it. When his squad found him, he was sitting on the floor of the temple, surrounded by 4 dead. His hands were covered in blood. His eyes were distant. Said Sergeant Han, "Are you okay?" He looked up at her. He was 21 years old. He had never killed anyone before today. "I am alive," he said. "That is enough." Nodded, she understood. By hour 14, Sergeant Han had run out of ammunition for her heavy weapon. The massive gun had fired over 3,000 rounds. Its barrel was warped from the heat. It was useless. So she found another weapon. A plasma caster lay on the ground, dropped by a dead enemy. It was huge, designed for creatures twice her size. The power pack alone weighed more than she did. Picked it up. She braced it against a collapsed wall and figured out the controls in seconds. When they sent another wave of soldiers, she met them with their own weapon. The plasma caster roared. Soldiers fell. The ones behind them kept coming. Kept firing. By hour 15, the commander was sending panicked messages to the hive mind's central consciousness. His reports were confused, almost hysterical. "The humans will not die," he transmitted. "The humans will not retreat. We have killed them 100 times and they keep coming. They are not soldiers, they are something else. They are a disease. They are a fire. They are a force of nature that does not know how to stop." The central consciousness did not understand. The humans were small. The humans were weak. The humans should be dead. But they were not dead. They were winning. At hour 17, Staff Sergeant Park lost his first Marine. Private was holding a choke point near the southern evacuation tunnel. The tunnel led to the underground shelters where thousands of civilians were waiting to escape. If they broke through, they would all die. Did not let them break through. For 47 minutes he held that position alone. Wave after wave of soldiers came at him, and he killed them all. His rifle ran dry, and he picked up enemy weapons. Those ran dry too, and he fought with his hands. Was 300 meters away when the final assault came. He heard his voice on the radio, calm and steady. "Sergeant, they are sending everything at me. I count maybe 50 soldiers and 2 tanks." "Hold on," said, "we are coming." "Negative. If I fall back, they will reach the tunnel. The civilians will die." "It has been an honor, Sergeant." The line went silent. When reached the choke point, was dead. He was lying against the wall, his rifle still in his hands, surrounded by bodies. He had held the position until his last breath. The civilians were safe. Knelt beside his fallen Marine and closed his eyes. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. At hour 18, Lance Corporal Shin died. She was pulling a wounded soldier from a burning vehicle. The soldier was twice her size, too heavy for her to carry alone, but there was no one else nearby and the fire was spreading. Grabbed the soldier and dragged him toward safety. She made it 10 meters before the vehicle exploded. Corporal O saw it happen. He screamed her name and ran toward the fire, but it was too late. The explosion had been too close. Had known the risk, she had gone anyway. That was who she was. As the 19th hour began, gathered his surviving squad. 6 Marines, covered in blood and dust, exhausted beyond anything they had ever known. "The evacuation is almost complete," he said. "Most of the civilians have reached the extraction ships. We just need to hold a little longer." "How much longer?" asked. "An hour, maybe 2. They looked at each other. They were out of ammunition, out of medical supplies, out of everything except the will to keep fighting. "Then we hold," said. Nodded. He looked at each of them, these people who had followed him into hell. "And died for these people," he said. "We will not let their deaths be meaningless." "No," said quietly, "we will not." Outside, they were regrouping for one final assault. They had brought everything they had left. Hundreds of soldiers, dozens of vehicles, enough firepower to level what remained of the city. 6 humans stood in their way. They attacked. And the humans held. The Imperium had existed for 5,000 years. In that time, they had consumed 11 species, destroyed hundreds of worlds, and spread across a quarter of the galaxy. They had never known defeat. Until now. At the 19th hour of the battle for Prime, the High Command made a calculation. They had lost more soldiers in one day than in the previous 50 years of conquest. Their ground forces were shattered. Their orbital fleet was under attack by human reinforcements that had arrived from somewhere beyond the system. The numbers did not make sense. 8 humans had held off their entire invasion force. 8 small, soft, fragile creatures had turned their victory into a disaster. The hive mind considered its options. It could send more forces, commit more resources, keep fighting until the humans were destroyed. But for what? One planet, one species. The cost was already too high. They made a decision they had never made before. They retreated. Commander Elia did not understand what was happening at first. She was in the command bunker, watching the tactical display, preparing for the final assault. They were massing their forces. This was it. This was the end. And then the red markers began to move, not forward, backward. Commander said, his voice shaking, "They are withdrawing." "That is impossible." "I know, but they are leaving, all of them." Elia ran to the observation post. The sky was still full of smoke, but through the gaps, she could see something she had never expected to see. Ships were rising from the surface. Troop transports, artillery carriers, command vessels. They were all leaving, climbing up through the atmosphere, fleeing toward their orbital fleet. They were running away. Below her, in the ruins of the city, the fighting stopped. Soldiers dropped their weapons and retreated. Defenders watched in disbelief as their enemies turned and fled. And standing in the middle of it all, battered and bloody but still on their feet, were 6 humans. Elia left the bunker and walked through the ruined streets. Soldiers and civilians were emerging from their shelters, looking around with confused eyes. They did not understand what had happened. Neither did she. She found the humans near what had once been a park. They were sitting on the rubble, checking their wounds, drinking water from dented canteens. They looked exhausted. They looked broken. But they were alive. Staff Sergeant Park saw her approach. He stood up, slowly, painfully. His armor was covered in burns and dents. His face was streaked with blood and dirt. He had been awake for over 30 hours and fighting for most of them. But when he looked at her, his eyes were clear. "Commander Elia," he said, "your people are safe. The evacuation ships are landing now. We will get everyone off-world before they can return." Elia stopped in front of him. They were tall, nearly twice the height of humans. She had to look down to meet his eyes. But somehow, standing there in the ruins of her city, she felt small. "Why?" she asked. Tilted his head. "Why what?" "Why did you come? We are strangers. We have nothing to offer you. We sent a message into the void and we did not expect anyone to answer. But you came, you fought, your people died." Her voice cracked. "Why?" Was silent for a long moment. Behind him, his squad watched and waited. "When I was a child," he said, "my grandmother told me a story. She said that when she was young, her village was hit by a flood. The water came at night without warning. People were trapped in their homes, drowning in the dark." He looked up at the smoke-filled sky. But then strangers came. People from other villages, people they had never met. They came with boats and ropes and bare hands. They pulled my grandmother's family from the water. They saved dozens of lives. And when it was over, when the flood had passed, my grandmother asked one of the strangers why he had come. Why he had risked his life for people he did not know. Looked back at Elia. The stranger said, "Because you needed help. That is all, because you needed help." Elia felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. "Your people died for us," she said. "How can we ever repay that?" "You do not have to repay it. That is not why we did it. But we must do something, we must." Reached out and touched her arm. His hand was small against her silver skin, but his grip was warm. "Live," he said. "Rebuild, remember. And if someday, somewhere, someone else sends a message into the void asking for help, answer it. That is how you repay us." Elia nodded. She understood now. She understood what they had failed to see. The humans were not dangerous because of their weapons or their ships or their technology. They were dangerous because they cared, because they would die for strangers, because they would march through fire and blood for people they had never met, simply because those people needed help. They conquered through fear. They made their enemies afraid, and that fear made them weak. But humans did not respond to fear the way other species did. Fear did not make them weak. It made them angry. It made them determined. It made them stand up and fight when any sane creature would run. They had spent 5,000 years making the galaxy afraid of them. Now the galaxy had something else to believe in. Behind, Corporal was treating wounded, working alongside their own healers. Private First Class was helping civilians carry their belongings toward the evacuation ships. Sergeant Han was standing guard, her stolen weapon still in her hands, watching the horizon for any sign of returning enemies. Corporal O and Private Moon were sitting together near a collapsed wall. They were not speaking. They were thinking about the friends they had lost. Elia looked at them all, these strange, small, impossible creatures. "Will you stay?" she asked. "When we rebuild, will you help us?" Shook his head. "We cannot. There are other messages, other calls for help, other people who need us." "You would do this again, even after everything you have lost." "As many times as we have to. That is who we are." The first evacuation ship landed in what remained of the city square. Civilians began boarding, carrying children and elderly, bringing what little they had saved from the destruction. They looked at the humans as they passed, with wonder and gratitude and something like awe. Gathered his squad. They formed up in their usual positions, with gaps where and should have been standing. "Time to go," he said. They walked toward the shuttle that would take them back to the Indomitable. They watched them go. No one spoke. No one had the words. But as the humans reached the shuttle, a sound began. It started with one voice, then two, then dozens, then hundreds. They were singing. It was a song of thanks, a song of mourning, a song of hope. They sang for the humans who had saved them. They sang for the Marines who had fallen. They sang for a galaxy that had just changed forever. Stopped at the shuttle door and looked back. 6 Marines, tired and wounded and grieving, stood beside him. Behind them, 4 million were still alive because 8 humans had decided that they mattered. "Sergeant," said quietly, "do you think they will remember us?" Watched the singing. Watched the children waving at the strange small creatures who had saved their lives. "Yes," he said, "they will remember." He stepped into the shuttle. The door closed behind him. The ship rose into the smoke-filled sky and climbed toward the stars. Below, they kept singing until the shuttle disappeared from sight. In the years that followed, they rebuilt their world. They joined the growing alliance of species that gathered around Earth, not as subjects but as partners and friends. They told the story of the 8 humans who had answered their call, who had fought and bled and died for strangers. The story spread across the galaxy. Other species heard it and wondered, could it be true? Would the humans really come if someone called for help? And somewhere in the void, the Imperium grew afraid, not of human weapons or human ships. They grew afraid of an idea, the idea that there were creatures in the universe who could not be conquered by fear, creatures who would fight for others without asking for anything in return. They had spent 5,000 years making the galaxy afraid. Now, finally, they understood what fear felt like. Staff Sergeant Park returned to the Indomitable with 6 Marines instead of 8. He wrote letters to 2 families. He did not sleep for 3 days. But when the next distress call came, he was ready. Because that was the promise humanity had made, not in words or treaties, but in blood and sacrifice. A promise that echoed across the stars, carried by every species that had heard the story of Prime. "If you call, we will come. If you fall, we will catch you. If you are alone in the dark, we will find you." Amid alien despair, smoke parted. And the Marines of Earth took the battlefield. Always.